Welcome to the NSCHBC Edge Podcast, leading the way in the business of medicine. Now here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NSCHBC Edge Podcast. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher. The Edge Podcast is brought to you today by the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants. Our goal is to discuss healthy business principles, have conversations on the business side of medicine, so that you and your practice can be profitable and successful for years to come. This week on the Edge Podcast, I'm actually going to give a few updates for your practices that came out of a 43-day government shutdown. It ended November 12th, and as you know, as of October 1st, many services were either stalled or expired without Congress in session or approval, including telehealth, hospital at home, and funding for many government services, including the $40 billion for rural health centers. So I'm going to try to give you a rundown of what happened during that time when the government was closed and now that the government is open. But first things first, we want to make sure that you're understanding kind of the landscape here. Many of the COVID era flexibilities that ended October 1st, because again, Congress has to make those extensions, they were restored on 11/13 when President Trump signed the continuing resolution back into law, and they were only extended again through January 30th of 2026. So let's hope we don't have another shutdown. Right now, the congressional infighting is very frustrating. I'm sure many of you feel the same way. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It's just not helping healthcare entities, and it's not helping, the country when we can't get anything together. So let me give you a little bit of a rundown here. And also for those of you that are interested in getting a lot of this in writing with cited references and information and where you can find this, we also have our Medicare webinar update that I present on Tuesday, December 16th, and so we hope you also join us for that. So this is mostly just kind of a rundown, if you will, and I think I mentioned that, just kind of letting you know what's going on. So one of the things that has come up was the DEA's ongoing efforts to extend their flexibilities around the in-person requirement for prescribing controlled substances. So, they want continued access to essential telehealth or telemedicine services. So what happened is on October 10th, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, posted a fourth temporary extension of the COVID-19 telemedicine flexibilities for prescribing controlled substances. These flexibilities were set to expire at the end of the year, but also the fact that the DEA has not yet released the full text of the extension. We're not sure how long it's supposed to last. So at this point, the final rule is still pending regulatory review. Now, historically, extensions usually lend to about extending through the year, but we don't know how long it would last because it's still pending regulatory review. And a lot of times when you're dealing extensions, it's also either fiscal year or they extend through when it was COVID, the year that the COVID extensions expired. Now, what we have for some of the telemedicine that were extended through December 31st, 2025, this fourth extension, again, just talking about this DEA, it is approved and the complete text published. We're hoping that it's coming soon, but we're going to make some assumptions here only because of the extensions from March when the new government extended things through March 30th and 31st. Now it's through January 30th of 2026. Now, a little bit of background on this too. Under federal law, the permanent law, it's called the Ryan-Haig Act, largely prohibits the prescribing of controlled substances without an in-person examination, and it has to be an initial one, which makes sense. Doctors are very nervous about prescribing medications, especially controlled substances, to patients they haven't met. And while the statute outlines several exceptions under the defined, and I'm air quoting, practice of telemedicine, these apply primarily when the patient is located in a hospital or a clinic in the presence of another practitioner. So as a result, these exceptions do not cover the routine model of telehealth that we're using today. And sometimes the patient and sometimes the provider do participate from home settings. Now, importantly, this is to note, the in-person requirement under the Ryan-Hague Act applies only to the initial visit, and the DEA has never required subsequent in-person requirements on those encounters. Again, we don't have full details yet as far as the extension. It is temporary, but they are continuing to suspend the initial in-person visit requirement for the period of the extension. Now, it's also important to note that these DEA extensions only affect federally controlled substance prescribing rules. So states still maintain their own requirements, which may include stricter requirements for in-person visits. I know where I'm from, California, they absolutely do. You have to have an in-person visit. And they want that prior to prescribing the controlled substances. So make sure you're looking at that's called CCHP Policy Finder for your state, and it gives these specific state requirements. Also, the DEA in-person prescribing requirement is separate from Medicare's policy requiring an in-person visit within 6 months prior to an initial telehealth mental health services and annually thereafter. So that Medicare mental health requirement is often confused with the DEA's prescribing standard that is tied to Medicare reimbursement rules and only applies to Medicare beneficiaries and providers seeking reimbursement for mental health services through Medicare if their situations do not meet certain exceptions, not to all patients. So just know that there is a difference between the two, and the Medicare in-person visit requirement is currently waived until January 30th, 2026. So that there's a difference again between the DEA in-person visit and then the Medicare's in-person visit requirement for mental health requirement for prescribing. So know that difference, because I'm seeing that being interchanged all the time, and that's not correct. Now also, just a reminder, where the DEA's in-person requirement, which is the topic, seems to be going along quite a bit, governs all practitioners prescribing controlled substances nationwide, regardless of payer. Now, because the eventual return of the DEA in-person requirement could possibly disrupt or affect patient access, the DEA has previously adopted 2 final rules specific to certain patient populations. So one is for buprenorphine treatment, and another is for Veteran Affairs patients, so for their services. So just keep an eye on that, because this proposed rule and special certifications and special DEA special registrations, you want to make sure for telemedicine that you understand who it affects, what patient population, and try not to get them mixed up with what Medicare says and then what DEA says, because that definitely is a problem, and we're seeing that quite a bit. Now, when we're talking about the post-shutdown CMS, what did they issue for statements regarding telehealth? Okay, so our flexibilities that we had prior to the shutdown, basically meaning that the patient could be in their home for any diagnosis, again, prior to 10/1. So Medicare patients can receive telehealth services for non-behavioral mental health care through January 30th, 2026. They have to be in the country, though. Remember, so does a doctor. And if the doctor sees a patient who's out of state, that doctor has to be licensed in that state where the patient is at the time of the service. Please don't mess with that. And also talk to your malpractice companies, because there's a lot of confusion about audio only. First of all, audio only is only covered if the patient does not have strong enough internet, so they're unable to connect, or at the time of the service, they refuse to be on camera if it's audio video for whatever reason. So you can't schedule an audio only anymore, because how would you know that until the time of the visit? And try not to be manipulative about that. And I do say this with love, because I do see some practices trying to get around a rule. Don't do that. Make sure you know you can't schedule those. Those are the exception, not the rule. So what happened when we shut down was that only behavioral health, mental health services, ESRD, so end-stage renal disease, and substance use disorder, I should say, were covered for telehealth where the patient was at home. Nothing else was covered after October 1st because it reverted back to pre-COVID rules. But those extensions, again, were extended to January 30th, and we'll see what Congress does with that. But right now, Medicare patients can receive telehealth services for non-behavioral mental health in their home through January 30th. There are no geographic restrictions for the originating site for Medicare non-behavioral mental health services, and that's where the patient is. And telehealth services can be provided by all eligible Medicare providers through January 30th. What that means is that we had a problem with, OT, PT patients, social workers. They were only temporary. They still continue to be temporary, but now they're still covered through January 30th. But they are not covered after January 30th, again, if Congress doesn't step in and fix this problem. So I just wanted to make sure that you had, that heads up, and that if you want further information and you want some more clarifications on what's going on with Medicare after the shutdown, please join us for our Medicare quarterly update. Again, that is going to be December 16th. Okay, everyone. So I just wanted to say that if you are interested in finding any of the NSCHBC members and consultants, you can go to our NSCHBC.org website and go under the consultant tab. You can type in our first name. For example, my name is Terry with a Y, and there I am. You can also find what state that everyone covers, what specialties. So if you're looking for a specific, if it's revenue cycle management, if it's tax consulting, whatever it is, the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants basically does it all in the healthcare space. As a reminder, the NSCHBC.org website offers free monthly webinars on a variety of topics, as well as I mentioned, the Medicare quarterly updates. And we just want you to go to your upcoming education tab on the NSCHBC.org website, and you can find that. Okay, also look for our Consultants Retreat Conference on January 8th through the 9th in Charlotte Harbor, Florida. And that will also be on our website under upcoming events and our education tab. So that's it for me today. Please join me next month when we once again bring you current and important topics in the business of medicine. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all, and we will see you in 2026. Have a great rest of your month. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher.
Thank you for listening to the NSCHBC Edge Podcast. Join us on the second Tuesday of each month as our consultants tackle the complexities of navigating the business of medicine. You can reach us on the web at nschbc.org, the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants.